Good evening, everyone out there. Welcome to the weekend that was for Monday, March 26th, the last show of the month. And there is a lot to cover because this week we have the Final Four to get into. We have a movie review. I know, I actually said I was going to try doing some of those, and this week I got an opportunity, so we'll get into that. A lot of interesting coaching news in the NCAA men's um, league as well. Um, and a lot of not so fantastic news coming out of the world as well. Plus, at the very end, if you stick around, I'm going to go off on ESPN. And why? Just stick around to find out. It's going to be entertaining. I certainly hope. But first of all, what are we going to drink this week? To be fair, I'm a little bit scared of what we're going to drink this week. It's a Dogfish Head brew. I like that brewery. They make some hefty beers because they have a set of IPAs. It's like a 60-minute, a 90-minute, and a 120-minute style IPA. And the higher the level of that IPA, or the longer they call that IPA, the heftier it gets. This is not one of those. This is a special brew that they did back in the winter. I picked it up when I was visiting some friends in Chicago, and we had a beer tasting there. Now, I unfortunately had to run before we got to this one because I had to meet up with some family members for dinner. It was a very important occasion that night. But they allowed me to take a bottle with me to try on my own time. And I just looked into it a little bit. It's 17% alcohol by volume. And that's one thing that is very interesting about that. The other thing is that when I talked to my friends who did have it, they were very mixed on it. It wasn't the most popular taste at that particular event, but all that aside, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it a shot this week. So let's just pop it and see. It's a very beautiful bottle, and there is some very cool flavor text on it that I will read real quickly. Celebrating 20 off-centered years with our luscious chocolate cherry birthday cake in liquid form. That's another thing that makes me nervous, is that I don't necessarily love cherry. But, I'm willing to try anything, at least once. You've heard me, I believe, talk about Braxton Brewing before. I think I have a beer that I'm going to feature by them in a future episode. But they partnered with an ice cream shop back home and have created two flavors of beer. One which is the one that I will feature, which is one that I like, which is their blueberry pie ale. The other one that I didn't like was their black raspberry chocolate stout, which I normally like chocolate stouts, but it was that black raspberry flavor that threw me off. Now, that being said, I'm not a fan of that flavor of ice cream from Grader's, but I thought I'd give it a try, and it just didn't do it for me. It smells like cherry chocolate cake. It really does. Let's give it a nice little pour here. Ooh, okay. Oh, okay. That's when you make the pour, you get a really interesting aroma with that. Ooh, that smells as strong as the alcohol percent volume does with it to begin with. Okay, I'm gonna put this back here. I wonder if it can. I'm gonna move that over. It can still be seen next to my Lovely little Patriots football. Okay. It's definitely got a lovely, lovely ale color to it. Let's see. They call it a golden ale. Doesn't look golden. It looks a little darker than your typical golden ale. I imagine that's due to some of the cherry and the chocolate flavors that they put into it. The overall rating from everyone who's given it a rating is 3.67. So it's mostly positive. However, if I go to my particular group of friends that on Untapped, they've given it a 2. So there's a very wide spectrum there between whether they like it or they don't like it. So let's dig into this. And as I said, 17%. So hopefully this one glass won't leave me too boozy by the end of the show today. Oh, that's nasty. Oh, I'm gonna finish it because no craft beer gets left behind. But I'm gonna do that with the absolute and utmost look of disgust on my face, and it's going to make for some amusing content. I'm sorry, I gotta flush that. That is not. Maybe it's the fact that I'm not a big cherry fan to begin with. But that goes down not so good. Oh, this bottle of water is not going to leave my side for very long. I can tell you that. That's going to be a struggle to finish. Let's see if we can do it by the end of the episode today. Okay, so let's get into the weekend that was in sports, and it was a very fun weekend. Lots going on, but the top of the echelon is the NCAA tournament. We are finally down to the Final Four. Now, on Thursday, I made an Elite Eight prediction video, and I flubbed it. I admit I went 1-3 that night. And then on Friday, I apologized, reset, and made my predictions for the second night of Elite Eight games, hoping to redeem myself, and I did. Okay, I don't look so dumb now, which makes me happy because when I looked at my bracket, I thought that my bracket was shot to absolute pieces, just like most other people's in the world right now. However, come to find out, throw out the South region, I didn't actually do so bad. I do only have 2 out of the remaining 4 Final Four, but I got one of the teams that a lot of people weren't sure was going to make it. If a lot of people said I got 2 out of 4, you would have gone with the 2-1 seeds, Kansas and Villanova. But I'm going to take a little bit of pride in the fact that I put a little bit of faith in Michigan. I have Michigan in the Final Four, and until late last night, I had forgotten that until I decided to give my bracket a little going through and just see where I was standing after all the games yesterday. I still have my champion, so Kansas is still available. West Virginia lost in the Sweet 16 to Villanova, but that was one of Villanova's better tests over the tournament, so I don't have any regrets in making that pick. Michigan, John Beilein always has his teams ready to play in tournament situations, and they I don't want to say they steamrolled through the Big Ten tournament, but they definitely won. They got in. They're a 3 seed. I like the way he coaches in tournament scenarios. So it was logical to me to, if I was going to not take a 1 seed, that was probably going to be one of my better bets, and it worked out in my favor for once. And then we'll throw away the South bracket because everyone who thought Arizona, Virginia, Cincinnati, Tennessee. Let's see, how many of the other seeds can I go through before we hit 9, which was the Elite Eight game? I've just Kentucky at the 5 and Miami at the 6. I mean, it was that. If you had a good bracket, everybody had a good bracket except for that region, unless you were probably an alum of Loyola. You go to Loyola now, or you're from the Midwest and you wanted to see both Michigan, and you're like, well, I live close enough to Chicago. Let's give Loyola a shot. Oh, you're going to have to forgive me for this one. That is, I don't normally make noises like that when I drink, but that one's forcing it on me. But we are strong. Humans. Strong. With beer. Apes strong together, Joe. Anyway. So the matchups going in, we have 2 1-seeds on one side in Villanova and Kansas. Go Jayhawks, rock chalk, make me proud, make me look kind of smart. And I have to just say something about Villanova, because some people have heard me talk crap about how this new Big East is compared to the old Big East, and how much I miss the old Big East with the Syracuse, the Pitts, the Louisvilles, the West Virginias, the UConns. And there's only one program in the new Big East that was from the old Big East that I kept faith in, and that was Villanova. Jay Wright and Villanova were, in the old Big East, were still a very competitive, top-tier Big East team. And it shows because ever since the reformation of the Big East and what it is today, yes, Xavier's come in and been extraordinarily good out of the A-10, but the beast of the Big East is still Villanova. And I have to look back, because when I heard that Xavier had taken the number 1 seed in the Big East tournament over Villanova, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it, because as good as Xavier's been in the Big East, they just haven't been able to beat Villanova. And those are the 2 top teams in the Big East. So, it just, until Xavier can get over the hump and beat Villanova at least one of their 2 games out of the year, I'm gonna just say that Villanova dominates that conference right now. And here they are in their second Final Four in 3 years, going for a second national championship in 3 years. Jay Wright just knows how to recruit. He knows how to get his players ready. And I heart Villanova. You are the one remaining team out of the old Big East that I continue to hold faith in. Yes, Providence has been better, but Providence also hasn't. Again, Providence is elevated by the fact that they don't have to play the UConns, Cincinnati's, Louisville's, and I know I'm going to say Pitt, but we'll get into Pitt later. But that's the one side of the Final Four. The other side of the four is Michigan versus Loyola of Chicago in a battle of the Midwest. And good for Loyola. It's at some point I just went, yeah, whoever goes in that bracket, man, whoever goes in that region, good on you. But I find it funny. There's a little bit of a funny story coming out, and that's that, for one, their team chaplain, Sister Jean, is Loyola has given some sort of trademark deal up for her, so she's going to be featured, I believe, on some sort of promo stuff for them and stuff like that, including a Sister Jean bobblehead, any Loyola fans or Chicago area people, do you want a Sister Jean bobblehead? I want a Sister Jean bobblehead. Well, maybe I'm stretching it a little far. I don't really have a collection room for a collection of bobbleheads. I build Lego models and I display those. I don't have room for bobbleheads. As a matter of fact, all my bobbleheads stayed back in the Midwest when I moved. But yeah, Sister Jean is getting her own bobblehead. So the Cinderella story goes on for Loyola, and we move on to the Final Four. It'll be interesting to see the ratings, especially in the Loyola game. Normally, I'd argue that normally they tell you that ratings go down when Cinderella makes it this far, but I think because of it being Chicago, because Chicago is such a big sports, center in the Midwest, I actually think that the ratings are going to spike because of it, especially with them playing Michigan. That's going to be such a great Midwest clash. So we'll get into the predictions of that on Friday, I believe, is when we're going to do that. So that's it for Final Four discussion going into this week. How is your bracket going in through the Final Four? You can leave a comment below. And it's time for us to move on to some of the varying headlines, including an interesting story that I believe just broke out of the NBA. First off, I hate tanking. I really do hate tanking. But I got to admit, the 76ers made this plan work. It came out this weekend, I think it was Saturday, that they clinched at least a playoff spot, is what I believe they got. There's still a lot of tight seed races in there. One of the things I am going to start doing is I'm going to get like a big old whiteboard and hopefully find somewhere to display that, and I'll be putting standings up. We're getting close to the draft. I'm hoping to do a live stream of the NFL draft, and we'll, see how that goes. But let's see. But the 76ers are going to be in the playoffs, and a very recent story that broke as I was getting settled in to do this recording tonight is that Markelle Fultz is now available to play for the 76ers after being out the entire year. And he's coming back with about 10 games to go in the regular season. I think that this is great for the 76ers. It'll give their top overall draft pick this year some time to get, hopefully in some sort of a game shape, to be able to help contribute greatly for his team. For his team going into the playoffs. And it'll give also the 76ers a chance to figure out where they want to put him in their rotation. But it's going to be an interesting playoff year. The 76ers are in. There's a very real chance that they could be facing LeBron and the Cavaliers in the first round. But that's such a great story. To me, it was disappointing to see the 76ers be so bad for so long. And admittedly, they were trying to be that bad. I just hate tanking. I mean, I don't know if there's a great way to remove tanking. They tried the draft lottery, and they're trying something new with the draft lottery this year where the bottom three teams each have equal opportunity. At this point, if you want to keep a lottery, is the only way to really prevent tanking to be sure that everybody gets an equal chance at ping pong balls. I don't like tanking because to me it just is. There's no pride. There's no pride in tanking, and I feel like it hurts the competition or the spirit of competition in the NBA. But them's the rules, and you do what you can with them. And the 76ers certainly have made a living off of tanking. And to be fair, though, when they've had their draft picks. They've made good draft picks, and they're starting to really show on the court. So another thing that happened over the weekend, there are two things concerning the Bennett brothers. Right now, one, you have more power. One is not so bad. Sorry about that. I was clicking the story to check some facts for it, and unfortunately, an ad started playing. So excuse the little interruption there. But the first thing I want to cover is the retirement of tight end Martellus Bennett, who had a very good career. I don't have all of his numbers, but he played for a good number of teams. I believe he won a Super Bowl in New England. He did bounce around for a little bit from team to team, but he had a good career. And as far as I know, he didn't really have a ton of off the field issues to deal with. So it's the end of a good career. I was hoping he wouldn't retire because I wanted him to play for another year in New England, especially with the uncertainty of Gronk. Now, as far as we know, Gronk is coming back. I still don't trust his health. I still don't trust that he can stay healthy at all. But we'll have to see. I mean, there's just no way to really tell at this point. His brother in some trouble. So apparently during Super Bowl weekend, Michael Bennett was trying to get onto the field after the Super Bowl. I think he just wanted to go and be with his brother on the field after the Super Bowl in what was such a tough loss for New England. Yes, there's bias there, as if you couldn't tell by my lovely little football here. But yes, there is some bias into how I felt about it. Yes, it was a great game. Yes, I'm okay with the outcome. It doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. But apparently an incident occurred where when Michael Bennett was trying to get down onto the field, he either shoved or made contact with an elderly worker of NRG Stadium after the Super Bowl. And that is bringing to him a charge of felony injury to the elderly. And I looked at let's see if it's in the story, because I remember looking at let's see if I can find yeah, there it is. Okay, it's at the bottom. So the potential penalty for this charge is described as intentionally and knowingly causing bodily injury to a person 65 years or older. But here's where here's what tickled my fancy a little bit here, or made me sort of question it. The penalty for this is a 10-year prison term and a $10,000 fine. 10 years in prison for now. I'm not advocating, that there's something right at all with any of this. Nobody should commit bodily harm to anybody, especially not someone over the age of 65. They are admittedly somewhat more fragile than we are at our young ages. But 10 years in jail for that? Like, you committed some heinous manslaughter crime? I mean, I don't think he'll get the entirety of 10 years. But when I saw that, I was shocked that is that severe of a sentence. I've seen people punished for less time for far more, heinous things. That's impressive. That's incredible. I can't get my head around that one. That being said, if he did willingly turn himself in, there was no manhunt or anything like that necessary. It appears as if he's going to cooperate with the investigation. Um, we'll see what comes out of this. Um, I don't think he's going to get all 10 years. I'd be very surprised if he gets 10 years. But the mere fact that that's a crime punishable of up to 10 years, if anybody sees this in Texas, because I believe that's where this happened, NRG Stadium in Houston, if anybody watches this from Texas, I would love to hear an explanation. My Twitter I will mention my Twitter at the end of this episode. If you could send me a tweet explaining that, I would be very, very appreciative, because it just seems excessive for me that a penalty like that is a penalty of that long seems a little bit over the top, if I may. Going back to the world of college, specifically men's college basketball right now, some coaching news. I'd like to start off with UConn and the hiring of Coach Dan Hurley from Rhode Island. Great hire. I think it is the perfect hire for UConn to make in this situation. He's a guy that has built Rhode Island up. Rhode Island was in shambles when he got there. Maybe not necessarily shambles, but they certainly weren't very good. And over a small little period of years, he built that program into a top 25, consistently good program. I don't think it was this year. I think it was last year. One of the few losses that Cincinnati took was to Rhode Island in one of their early season tournaments, like Battle for Atlantis type tournament. But it's a good hire. He will recruit that area very well, because Rhode Island is not far from where UConn plays their basketball in Connecticut. And he's just an upstanding guy. The UConn really put out all the stops for him, and it's going to be a good turnaround for UConn. I feel bad for Kevin Ollie, but Kevin Ollie did not do a good job. And it's one of those situations where you don't want to be the guy that replaces the legend, because the standards are set so high for you. You want to be the guy that replaces the guy that replaces the legend. So Kevin Ollie had that one good year, but admittedly it was with Jim Calhoun's recruits and players. So Kevin Ollie had that one good year where they made that magical run and won the championship. But in the end, he just didn't recruit very well and just didn't live up to the expectations. So he replaces the legend Jim Calhoun, has that good year, stumbles therefore after, and so now he's out in with Hurley. The other interesting coaching news, and I got off the phone with a source back in the city of Cincinnati, is that Louisville is looking to replace Padgett as interim, and the leading candidate for that is Xavier's Chris Mack. Now, the thing I talked about with my source for this is whether or not it's worth it for Chris Mack to leave a quality program like Xavier, which is a top 25, top 10 even team year in and year out, the second best team in the Big East, admittedly it's an ACC program, but it's an ACC program that is facing possibly even more sanctions based off of what happened with all the Patino scandals and the player and the AAU scandals. Yes, I know the NCAA vacated all those wins, but they're possibly looking at more sanctions, including, and I do believe there's some recruiting restrictions there and some postseason. Maybe it was just this year, or they thought about putting in some future postseason restrictions. But is it worth Chris Mack to leave Xavier for Louisville? And I'm not entirely sure that it is. But what my source said is that Louisville is prepared to pay Chris Mack a ridiculous amount of money and give him a good long-term contract that should entice him away, which would leave Xavier with an opening. And the rumor out there is that if Chris Mack leaves, Loyola coach Porter Moser would be the leading candidate to replace Mack at Xavier. If I'm looking at this in this situation, I personally think that Mack is better off staying at Xavier, and Porter Moser, admittedly even with those restrictions, is looking at, I'm coaching at a Missouri Valley team now. I can really step it up and go to an ACC team and go to Louisville. I just think it makes more sense for Mosier to go to Louisville over Chris Mack, but that's because I think Xavier is actually a high quality program that is worth staying at. Now, again, it'll be interesting to see what sort of money they throw at Chris Mack that would make him willing to take that Louisville job. My prediction is that Louisville will throw a large sum of money at him, and Chris Mack will look very hard at it. But then the dominoes will have to fall from there, so we will see where that goes. And the last opening I want to sort of go over is Pitt, another ACC program that fired their coach this year because of how bad Pitt was awful. Pitt was one of the worst teams I've seen play in a long, long time, which is a shame. Jamie Dixon had a good year. He left 2 years ago and has built TCU into a decent quality program. Pitt brought in Kevin Stallings from Vanderbilt, and he did a good job at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's not an easy place to win in both football and basketball, but he did an okay job there. And they just tanked, they've had trouble getting a coach in. I actually haven't had a good opportunity to really look at leading candidates for that job. Mosier may look at that one as well. Just throwing that possibility out there. As a matter of fact, I am almost convinced that one of the reasons Pitt hasn't really said anything about their coaching search is because they're waiting for Loyola to get knocked out so then that they can go talk to Mosier without him being taken away by coaching his team through the tournament right now. But that's a job that I look at and I go, why would you take that? I know Pitt's a good quality school, but Pitt, after the firing of Stallings, has been a dumpster fire. They've lost 9 of their players, including their leading scorer. They've lost all their best players. They're all transferring out. If you go to Pitt, you're going to be left with a skeleton of any semblance of a team. Now, Pitt would probably be easy to recruit and build back up in a hurry if you get the right guy. But if you're part of the Pitt organization, you're going to have some patience because it's going to take some time to build up the team from as bad as it was to, at this point, non-existent. There is no team in Pitt. You're going to have to recruit from scratch. You're building an entire team from scratch because they've all left. It's really depressing. I enjoyed watching a lot of Pitt games. Some of my favorite years of watching old school Big East basketball were when Georgetown had Roy Hibbert and Pitt had DeJuan Blair. Those were some fun battles between big men. And another reason why I kind of miss the Big East being the way it was. The last story I want to cover is a really big downer. Like a really sad story. Zeke Upshaw, who is a who was a player in the G League, the developmental league, collapsed. Yeah, I believe it was Saturday, near the end of a game, and unfortunately today it has come out that he has passed away. And 26 is not an age to go. It is just it's devastating. No parent wants to ever have to bury their kid. If I were to take a wild guess, I'm no doctor, but it probably, if you look at, I think they're going to perform an autopsy, and I think they're going to find a very similar situation to what happened to, I can't remember his name, a fellow that he collapsed in a college basketball game many years ago. They've created a documentary about him. I very sadly cannot remember his name, and it's going to bug me for a little while, but the Grand Rapids Drive are an affiliate of the Detroit Pistons. They send out their best regards, as do I, to his family. It's really hard. It is difficult to move on from tragedies like this, but on we go. Oh, that is just. I know I keep saying it, but that is just not. That is not my favorite. I've had significantly better. I've actually had worse, but I do not like that one. Okay. So let's get on now that I feel like we've covered a bunch of our bases here in the world of sports to another passion of mine, which is film and cinema. And we'll start it off with our top 5 box office report for this week. And Pacific Rim Uprising has finally knocked off Black Panther. I shouldn't put it that way because I really loved Black Panther. But Black Panther had been number 1 in the country for 5 straight weeks. And now it goes to Pacific Rim Uprising, who Pacific Rim Uprising makes just over 28 million domestically. Now, that number is okay. That's okay domestically. Where it really is making money, though, is overseas. It's making a lot more money overseas. I think if you include the overseas, it goes up to 150 million, which is incredible. But it also shows that there maybe wasn't a taste for it here, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. Black Panther was number 2. It pulled in another 17 million, and it brought its total domestic over 631 million, and it has taken over as the top grossing domestic superhero film of all time, which is impressive. We'll see how long it holds on to that, though, because Infinity War is coming just like winter. Game of Thrones reference, had to do it, even though we're getting into spring. The second, number 3 on the list is a movie called I Can Only Imagine, which it pulled in $13 million this week, but its 2-week total now is over 38, which is really impressive when you consider that its budget was only $7 million. So congratulations to the people behind that movie. That tells me that you've made a fantastic film, and it's one movie that if I can find it out here, I really want to go see, especially if, you can put in that much effort and get some fantastic return on only $7 million. Number 4 is Sherlock Gnomes, which pulled in 10.5 million really on its opening week, which doesn't surprise me. It looks pretty bad. I'm not sure if it's one that I'm going to go out of my way to go see, in spite of the fact that I love animated films. I'm an adult and I still like kiddie films, but that one looks really bad. Tomb Raider. Okay, Tomb Raider pulled in another 10 million, Its domestic total is 41 million on a budget of 94, which sounds like you're making a loss, but again, that movie seems to be doing very well overseas. I wish I had the number in front of me. I sadly don't right now, but yeah. So Tomb Raider's getting a little bit of love, and it's I should go see it. I haven't had a chance to, again, I've been busy. You'll have to forgive me. I've just been so busy over the past couple of weeks with tournament and stuff like that that I haven't had a good chance to really go see a lot. Um, but I've heard it's actually quite good. So I want to give it a shot. A Wrinkle in Time is six. That's pulled in $74 million domestically. Again, I think Disney was hoping for more, but we'll see how it continues to do, especially again overseas. So, movie. What movie did I go see this weekend? Well, let me start off by saying I was a very big fan of the first Pacific Rim. I actually thoroughly enjoyed the story. I liked the characters. I loved the giant Jaeger robots versus the evil monster kaiju. It was good fun, and it actually wasn't an awful story as far as I can remember. So enter Pacific Rim Uprising, where we have a sequel to the original. So it brings in John Boyega as Jake Pentecost, the son of Stacker Pentecost, the hero of the last film and the one who made the ultimate sacrifice to end the Kaiju War. It brings in Scott Eastwood as Nate Lambert, his Jake Pentecost's co-pilot in his Jaeger. It introduces, now I hope I don't muddle this up, Kaylee Spaney as Amara, who is a young, essentially technical genius who has built her own Jaeger in the movie. But it also brings back some characters from the first movie, including, I'm going to butcher this, I know I am, Rinko Kikuchi as Mako. Charlie Day comes back as Dr. Newt, and Bern Gorman as Dr. Herman Gottlieb. So what I really was hoping for was some great chemistry between the scientists, because that was one of my favorite parts of the first movie. So let's start off with things that I thoroughly enjoyed. I liked John Boyega. I'm not a big fan of, I like his character. You put John Boyega in almost anything and he brings it. A+ effort for John Boyega. And, his character was okay. There's decent story behind his character. My biggest negative was Scott Eastwood's character. If he was supposed to be sort of the comic relief co-pilot, I don't think I laughed at anything he said maybe once. I think there was one great scene with Boyega and Eastwood's characters that made me chuckle a little bit, but in the end, I thought that the character of Lambert was not very well rounded. It just didn't like him. Amara, I give credit to the young girl that played her. Her character was okay. It fit the narrative that they were going with. I'm very on the fence with it as to whether or not I thoroughly liked that character or not. But I'm going to go on the mostly positive side, mostly because I think that the actress did a good job portraying that character. But, it doesn't. It does explain sort of where she came from, but it doesn't explain how where she comes, as much where she comes from and where some of this genius comes from, or you think that there'd be some connection between her genius and especially the fact that, again, as I said, she builds her own mini Jaeger, and this might get a little spoilery, but she can pilot this little Jaeger all by herself. And I will get into what I think of her Jaeger in a little bit. Um, but then we sort of get into all the secondary characters, and the most disappointing one to me was Mako, because you were like, okay, cool, they're bringing some of these characters back, and it's going to be quite nostalgic for the first movie. And then Mako's on the character of Mako is on the screen for maybe a total of 3 minutes. Of all the characters that came back, the one that got the most screen time and was the most enjoyable was Dr. Herman. I thoroughly enjoyed that performance. I like that character. Charlie Day as Newt, when they feature him a couple times in the trailer. And I will also say that while I understand how they use the character, I don't exactly approve of how they use the character. It's really difficult for me to really go into that in depth without giving away any spoilers. But the three biggest disappointments for me character-wise were Dr. Newt, Mako, and Lambert. And to be in the case of Scott Eastwood, his acting did not help at all in that situation. As far as plot goes, it was fine. It wasn't anything new. It wasn't anything special. We have our new Jaegers. Unfortunately, most of them I can't remember the names of because they were fairly forgettable. The new Gypsy Jaeger is known as Gypsy Avenger. There is a Jaeger that shows up early in the film that is called Obsidian Fury. It's, again, spoilers about Obsidian Fury. But where it really gets interesting is Amara's little Jaeger. And this is where I start to take some real objections with this movie. Starting to turn, it's really, I wanted more of this monster versus kaiju story, but what I'm starting to get is a little bit of a Transformers feel because this, again, trying not to be too spoilery, Amara's Jaeger is a small Jaeger able to be piloted by purely herself, named Scrapper. And I just look at Scrapper, and again, when Scrapper shows up at the end of the movie, the only thing that pops into my head is, oh look, Pacific Rim just gave us their version of Bumblebee. It's Bumblebee, everybody. So, in that essence, I was not into the Jaegers in the same way that I was in the first movie because they're there, they're cool, but they're just not as memorable as they were in the first movie. So in that sense, it was a little bit of a downer there. As far as the action is concerned, I mean, there really was very little action that impressed me until the very end when the kaiju finally do show back up in the world. And for those who are wondering, well, how do they... I thought they sealed all the breaches in the Pacific Rim that ban the kaiju from Earth forever. That is one thing they actually do very well, is show exactly how they come back, and that is very cleverly done. So I will say, if you go see this, that is one thing that they do well. But when the kaiju come back, that's where the action in this movie really starts taking off. Unfortunately, it's like the last half of the third act. So you're like, can I get to the action? Where's the fight? I want the like action that I wanted from Pacific Rim. What this is, it shows up, but it's short, it's brief, and but you know, when they do it right. So I'm going to give them credit for that. And also the CGI with it works. They did a good job there. So it's a very pretty movie. If I'm going to put my final thoughts in are the characters I'm mixed on. There are some good, there are some bad. The performances are very meh outside of Boyega and the young actress who played Amara, Kaylee. Um, the action when it's there is fantastic. It's shot pretty well. It really is shot very well. Um, is it fun? Yes. Is it funny? Because there are some times where they really do try to force some comedy moments on you. I didn't like. There were a few light chuckles, but in the end, I didn't really get a. I didn't really get a. Like they just didn't land with me. The jokes were. Again, I think the best way of putting it is the jokes fell flat. Ah. Ah. Am I going to recommend Pacific Rim Uprising? It depends. If you're looking for the action movie that you wanted in the first one, it's not that. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go right down the middle on this one. I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 10. I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 10. And a little bit of a spoiler, the last scene sets up another movie, and they're talking about making this a whole universe, which I guess they're gonna have to if it's gonna make all this money overseas, even if it doesn't make a ton of money here at home. But the way they set it up is really dumb and really cheesy. And to be perfectly honest, I don't want to see another one of these because it's just turning into the Transformers franchise I've come to dislike. So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's okay. I had some fun with it. It's certainly not as good as the first one, and I certainly am not going to be rushing out. Okay, that's a lie because I like to go see movies like this, even if they are bad, but I'm not going to be clamoring for the sequel, whenever it comes. So that'll do it for my little movie review. I know that one was a little spacey. I do sports better. I'm working on my cinematography and all that. My film scores. You'll have to give me a little patience. Those will come in time. Sports does come more naturally to me, but I hope that was at least fun and insightful. I try to take my inspirations from the guys at Collider and John Campea and Chris Stuckman. Those guys are just fun listens to. If you are interested in like fun reviews, I definitely recommend Collider, Schmoes, Stuckman, Jeremy Johns, Screen Junkies. The plus those guys do put on great content. So those are my inspirations there. Just wanted to give them a little shout out as I get started on that portion. Okay, so now that I finished with that, it's time for me to go on that little tangent of a rant that I promised at the end of this. And I'm going to just bring in my little prop down here for a second. I unfortunately don't have a little stand for him. One of my favorite things in sports that got me really into it, and my first love, was motorsports. Here's one of the little Lego models that I just was talking about that I display. It's a Formula One car. And, my first passions for well, not my first passions, but when I really started getting into it, it was the Indy 500, and it was NASCAR, and it was Formula One that really got me moving into the person that I am today. And, back in the day, ESPN carried NASCAR, and ABC and ESPN carried all the IndyCar. Back then, the big event you wanted to watch was the Indy 500. And I will honestly say the person that molded me into today, the day that molded me into the person that I am today, was the 1997 Indy 500. That was my first big motorsports moment for me. But F1 was always a little different. Mostly because Formula One goes all over the world, and the various times that you have to watch it change week in and week out depending on where they are. When I first started watching it, Speed TV, when back in the day when that was still big, I don't think it is anymore, which I'm going to kind of throw some blame on the fact that they decided to start doing some reality stuff and it just wasn't very good and people stopped tuning into all that. That's another point. But recently, NBC Sports Network was the network that had the deal. Over the winter, ESPN came out and announced that they had gotten the rights to do the Formula One broadcasts. Fine by me. I have the Watch ESPN app on most of my mobile devices, so it's easier for me to watch it than it would have been on NBCSN, just because I don't have like a local cable or satellite service. But I do have my app, so it meant that I could be like, awesome, I'm gonna get back into watching F1 regularly. And this past weekend, the first race of the weekend, the Australian Grand Prix. And it's at 12:30 in the morning. The pre-race starts at 12:30 in the morning out here. So it's already a bit of a challenge for me who has this normal sleep schedule because of my main day job to try and get to bed early. So I decided to pound a little bit of an energy mix, which I usually throw into my water bottle here. Thanks to Mio Energy, that stuff keeps me up at night when I need it to. And 12:30 comes. I finished watching what was on before, which was the E60 special about the top 20 most dominant athletes. And I'm like, okay, awesome, here we go. Time for some Formula One. And we get a picture of the corner with no audio. Okay. So they break the commercial. Okay, I get it. Technical difficulties. They happen. You haven't done F1 for a long time. I don't know if they've ever done it, but it's your first time doing this. I understand that technical difficulties happen. I'm okay with them going to like one commercial break here. No, fine. So then they come back. It's the same image from the same turn. You do have some just background audio from, sounds maybe of the crowd there or, something going on at the track. No announcers. Nothing. No welcome to ESPN's Formula One coverage. And that goes on for another 30 seconds. And then they break away to commercial. Okay. Technical difficulties. It's happened twice. I get 2 times. Third time's this charm. And then when they come back from that commercial break, we are looking at a scene of the crowd there at the track. You can hear the audio of the crowd. Maybe some words from the announcer of the track. No announcers welcoming you to the coverage. And then they break away again. And I thought this was going to go right to another commercial break, but instead they started replaying that same E60 special that I had just watched. Okay, ESPN, we're getting a little mad here. And I started following on Twitter. And boy, the rage of the F1 fans out here in America was starting to show, including from myself. We're sitting here going, well, there's only about 15 minutes till the 20 to 15 minutes right till the race begins. Are we even going to get the race to go? Where's your coverage, ESPN? What is going on? You're angering all the people who tuned in and stayed up late, well past normal people's bedtimes to watch this race. Eventually, they cut back, and this may be my own stupidity for not realizing it, but ESPN is simulcasting with Sky Sportsnet out of England, which is fine. If they had done it right, I wouldn't have minded. But part of me is sitting there going, we just missed 20 minutes of a pre-race show, and they're just on the grid, pulling whoever they can aside, whether it be a former driver like Niki Lauda, who is a fun interview. If you've ever seen like Niki Lauda interviews, whether it be about his racing career or his airline, he's a great interview. Fantastic guy. They pulled away whatever random driver they could trying to get to their car. It was kind of a hectic pre-race show. I mean, it really was. They called it On the Grid, and legitimately it was on the grid. But, and maybe it's Sky Sports, but I didn't like the way they formatted that. Now, mind you, I missed 20 minutes because the ESPN feed was shit. This mate. We're almost there. We're halfway there. So we missed 2/3 of the pre-race show because the American feed was shit. And we're sitting there going, you got to get your crap together, ESPN. You spent all this money and you can't get it right. Okay, so to the race itself. This is where ESPN truly messed up. Because of how Sky Sportsnet does their race cast, they do it commercial free, which is all good and fine, except that somebody at ESPN decided when it was good to go to commercial break. Now, the way we broadcast racing here, yes, we do have commercial breaks, but if you're going to simulcast with a network that doesn't, that's going to create some confusion. ESPN broke away multiple times mid-sentence at an inopportune time, and there were various key points, like many key points in that race that were missed because they went to a commercial break, and admittedly sometimes they did a side-by-side, but that's not good enough for me. Because you're going to miss something, and because their Sky Sportsnet is doing this commercial free, they don't do a while you were away at commercials sort of deal with replays that show you things that you would have missed while you were away watching commercials, and that makes the broadcast a mess. I am calling out ESPN, specifically in this case. It's not Sky Sportsnet's fault. Everything they did goes according to their plan because they broadcast commercial free. ESPN, you spent a ton of money to get the rights to broadcast Formula One racing, which is very popular, not just around the world, not just in the United States, but around the world. And here in the United States, you are now the outlet for us. And yet, the mega powers that is cannot get together a broadcast team of their own to go out and broadcast these Formula One races to the point where, in our style, I get if you're going to, there's a problem, the problem you can solve if you want to do this simulcast is this. Get some corporate sponsors like you do for soccer and do commercial-free broadcasts as well so that we don't miss anything. But if you're going to do it the way we typically do, ESPN needs to send their own crew with their own broadcasters with just their own experience to go out there and broadcast the race that way themselves. You cannot do a simulcast with breakaways like that. It is bad for the fans, and F1 should be pissed at you for putting all that money out there and not promoting their sport the way that they expected you would. ESPN should be ashamed for how their coverage of the Australian Grand Prix went. As a fan of Formula One, I was disappointed beyond words. And if you followed Twitter, the anger that was being felt by all the fans of Formula One was shared in the United States. Again, nothing bad to say about Sky Sports Net. I actually like their broadcast team. Either ESPN needs to make a deal with them to sort of do a segment with them about what happens when they go to break, or they need to send their own team. And for the money that they spent to get the coverage rights for this, it shocks me that they don't have their own Formula One team out there. It's beyond reason to me that they don't have their own broadcast team out there. I mean, what can you do, though? We will see if ESPN learns from this mistake. I have my doubts because, again, just there's been no news. But ESPN did put out an apology for it. I'm not buying it. Apart from the fact that they flubbed, and even the post-race apparently was junk coverage. I loved watching the old broadcast where you had a good pre-race show. Even ESPN screwed that one up. The race coverage was what you expect, but even post-race, podium celebrations and the interviews. I hope ESPN fixes this because I really do want to enjoy my Formula One coverage. But if ESPN is going to continue this simulcast system without coming up with corporate partners to broadcast the entire race the same way, the simulcast system with Sky will not work. That's all I have to say about that right now. We'll see if it continues to get any better or any worse, given that. Thank you, everyone, for spending time with me on this Monday. It has been over an hour since we started recording. Thank you so much for your patience. It's been a long week. It's been a long couple of weeks. We're finally getting back into the swing of things. If you want to contact me, my Twitter handle is DLMoviesports. If you want to let me know what you thought, if you're an F1 fan, if you want to talk about the Formula One coverage, leave a comment below. Let me know if you have a better solution. Let me know if you want to see a different network cover it, because I do remember hearing a lot of people say NBC Sports should not have given that up. And I kind of am in agreement, but we are stuck with what we have right now. What suggestions do you have for ESPN? How is your bracket? Any other sports topics? What did you or even better, what did you think of Pacific Rim Uprising? Comment below. Hit me up on Twitter, or hit me up on social media. I want you all to have a very good rest of your Monday. And until next time, I hope you don't have a beer as nasty as this. Cheers.